to Miscellaneous. Sort of talk. And today we're in for a little bit of a chat. This is a wonderful exchange of questions and answers, some of which you'll relate to, some of which you may not. But whatever comes through, just stay in that soft listening mode, because all of what's being described here can be experienced in the practice. So if it isn't your direct experience at the moment, the information is useful, not in terms of sort of stages and development, but in terms of insight, wisdom. And in this practice, we judge our progress not by some esoteric experience of the mind, but by the wisdom we develop. So progress is by wisdom, and wisdom changes behavior. So then we judge our progress by the behavior changes we see in ourselves. Buddha described as often asked, what level is that person? What level is this person? What is their experience? And after a while he said, it's down to the individual to test this for themselves. Okay? Now, how do you know if somebody is an arahant? Well, it's said in the commentaries, you have to live with them for 7 years. Okay? Because in 7 years, you'll see them in all possible permutations. And only then would you be able to judge. So you might say, if you feel there's behavior change, just keep watching. And see yourself in many different environments. See your responses. See your reactions. And don't assume something. Be curious all the time. One of the most honest responses to this that I know of is for someone to say, I was in this environment and these circumstances, and I was surprised I didn't behave this way. This is how I'd have expected to behave, but I'm not behaving like that anymore. And that's surprising. So it's more like that. What isn't arising, rather than what I've got. Okay? So this discourse is between two people, and they themselves have an interesting history, which I hope Andy, as we start, will share. So this is Majjhima 44, the shortest series of questions and answers. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Rajagaha, in the bamboo grove, the squirrel's sanctuary. Then the late Father Vipassana went to the Bhikkhuni Dharmadina, and after paying homage to her, sat down on one side. Was going to ask her some questions. Now these people, Dharmadina and Vipassana, they have a history.
So this is the story from the commentaries. Bante Vimalamsi used to say this. Bhikkhuni Vaishaka is a character we have heard about. That was Lady Vaishaka, Migara's Mata. But this is a male Vaishaka. So it is like the names which are there in Punjabi, which is there Rose Singh and Rose Kaur. So there can be a male and female, they can have the same name. But so Vaishaka is the husband, and Dhammadina was her previous wife. So once what happened was Vaishaka came home, and her wife, loving wife, went to kind of receive her. So he was not interested in kind of hugging her, and he stayed, maintained a distance. Then she served him food, and he was kind of just having the food, but not very kind of uh, showing emotions. Then she asked, "What happened? Is there something wrong?" Then he said, he confessed that I had gone to listen to the Buddha, and I have now become a anagami. So one of those things which we explained about the anagami stage is that you give up the lust and you give up aversion. So one of those things is that if in that state you cannot have a normal husband and wife relationship because your mind has given up the attachments. So tells her that I will support you, but I will not be able to be stay like husband and wife, but we'll stay as brother and sister. Then she says that, oh, then what I also had a desire to become a nun, and always I had a desire to kind of become a bhikkhuni. So what she does is asks his permission, because you require the permission of your spouse to become a monk. So what she does is she asks the permission, and he allows her. And when she becomes a nun, she becomes a arahant. So she has grown more than him, and now he comes to ask some questions. Like Sariputta has been titled the wisest among the monks. So she has been titled the wisest among the bhikkhunis. So the title given to Vaishaka. So in the last we will see that how the Buddha praises her is similar to how he praises Sariputta.
So, so the answer to these questions. Lady, identity is said. What is called identity by the Blessed One? Friend disciple, these five aggregates affected by clinging are called identity by the Blessed One. That is, material form, physical form. The material form aggregate affected by clinging. The feeling aggregate affected by clinging. That's pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant or unpleasant sensation. The perception aggregate affected by clinging. So we can best think of this as memory. The formations aggregate affected by clinging. Now the formations here are all of the mental formations that can be possibly created that are not feeling or perception. Okay, so it's a catch-all term. And the consciousness aggregate affected by clinging. So the activity in the mind that recognizes each of these aggregates. Okay. Are called identity by the Blessed One. Okay, so the identity is created by the clinging. Saying, good lady, the lay follower Visakha delighted and rejoiced in the beauty of Dharmadika's words, then asked her a further question. The original identity is said. What is called the origin of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visakha, it is craving. So remember in the dependent origination, craving is the I like it, I don't like it mind as a reaction to pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant or unpleasant feeling. Okay? It is craving which brings renewal of being, is accompanied by delight and lust, and delights in this and that. That is craving for sensual pleasures, craving for being, and craving for non-being. This is called the origin of identity by the Blessed One. So craving for being, if you like, is holding on to a certain experience and wanting to persist in, let this continue. Craving for non-being is not wanting certain experience to continue. Okay? Lady, cessation of identity is said. What is called the cessation of identity by the Blessed One? Friend Visakha, it is the remainderless fading away and ceasing, the giving up, relinquishing, letting go, and rejecting of that same craving. This is called the cessation of identity by the Blessed One. So what do you practice? gives us insight into the cessation of identity. 6 hours. Okay? Because we recognize the mind is being pulled away. That's cleaning. We release away from that. Okay, so we turn our attention away from that to be aware of the manifestation of craving, tension, and tightness of the mind and the rest of the body. And we release and soften out that tension and tightness. That's the releasing of craving. So in that moment, we have no craving. It may only be a click of the finger. Okay? But that's what we're doing. The way leading to the cessation of identity. The way leading to the cessation of identity is said. What is called the way leading to the cessation of identity by the Blessed One? Well, and did describe this to you last night. The way to the leading to the cessation of identity is just this noble eightfold path. That is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Now, Mandy reframing those in the way that Mandy has, which is in turn harmonious. What is harmonious about each of these? Okay. Then, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging? So remember what those 5 were: the body, feeling, perception, the centaurs and formations, and consciousness. So is clinging the same as these? Or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates that are affected by clinging? Friend, the second, that clinging is neither the same as the 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is clinging there. So what does that mean? It means that the 5 aggregates are not the same as clinging, but clinging can only happen to those 5 aggregates. Okay? So when we have the story going on about why we like or don't like something, that story is attached to one of the 5 aggregates or one or more of the 5 aggregates. Either the body, feeling, perception, or any of the sankharas. No, any of the sankharas. These are mental activities. So all of the Brahma Viharas are in the sankharas. All of the hindrances are in the sankharas. So, yeah, and lots of other things as well. Intention is in the sankharas. So we can be attached or averse, the clinging, to any of these things. So that's why we say that the Brahma Viharas is just a waymark. Try not to get caught. So some of you have found that as your mind develops, for instance, the feeling of love and loving kindness begins to disappear. And then you go back and try and regenerate it. Again, and that's clinging to one of the factors in the jhanas. Whereas just observe that the mind changes. Mind you, the Buddha said if you're going to cling to anything, cling to one of the Brahma Viharas, because you're not going to cause yourself any problems or harm, not going to cause anybody else problems or harm, not going to cause both of yourself and others problems and harm. But the invitation, even then, is not to cling. Lady, how does identity view come to be? Here, friend Masada, an untaught ordinary person who has no regard for the learned ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their dharma. This just means someone who doesn't meditate, okay? Who has no regard for true men, so unskilled and undisciplined in their dharma, regards material form as self, or self as possessing material form. or material form as in self, or self as in material form. So this is a classic Indian philosophical perspective. It covers all the possibilities of your relationship to material form. Either you possess it or it possesses you, you know. So any possible relationship you could have material form that makes it me, mine, my own in some capacity is covered in these four phrases. Okay. He regards feeling as self, or self as possessed of feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. How many times have you taken an unpleasant feeling person? That's covered in these three phrases. How many times have you sat down wanting to have the same experience as the last sentence? How many times have you sat down hoping you don't have the same experience as the last sentence? So now you can see the identity around this. Okay. The student regards perception as self. Or self as perception, and perception as in self, or self as in perception. How many times have you viewed your memory as yours, exclusive, mine, part of me, what makes me up, what makes me different, separates me from others? This is viewing perception, memory, as me, mine, and my own. They regard as self, as formations as self, or self as possessed of formations, or federations in self, or self as in formations. So remember, the formations include all interests. How many times do you take an interest us? Yeah. Your aversion to something, your attachment to something, your doubt about something, the restlessness. How many times do you feel you have to control restlessness? If restlessness was self, you would be able to control it. But restlessness is not self. It's an impersonal process. How many times have you wanted the experience of a particular promenade to continue? How many times do we feel we're moving on a linear progression? And I'm here, and I want to be better, and then you find yourself back here. Yeah. Because the problem arose are not us. This is saying the same colors would be self. We would be able to control them, but they're not self. They're impersonal processes. All you can do is cultivate the conditions and observe what is going on. You're in control of your relationship to your experience, not the actual experience itself. The student regards consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness in itself, or self as in consciousness. How many times have you wanted your consciousness to be identical to the previous? You cannot conjure up what you want.
This is also Sati, son of a fisherman, was making consciousness into a kind of a being or a permanent thing rather than a kind of a dependently arisen thing.
That is how identity view comes to be. When we think these things are under our control. And then what happens when we find they're not? We get annoyed, we get disappointed, we get irritated, we look for something to blame. But these things were never under our control. Lady, how does identity view not come to be? Here, disciple, friend disciple, a well-taught, noble disciple, who has regard the noble ones, and is skilled and disciplined in their dharma, who is regarded for true men, and is skilled and disciplined in their dharma. That just means you meditate in the way that the Buddha described. Does not regard material form as self, or self as possessed material form, or material form as in self, or self as in material form. Does not regard feeling as self, or self as possessed of feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. It does not regard perception as self, or self as possessed of perception, or perception as in self, or self as in perception. Does not regard formations as self, or self as possessed of formations, or formations in self, or self as in formations. Does not regard consciousness as self, or self as possessed of consciousness, or consciousness in self, or self as in consciousness. That is how identity view does not come to be. So the temptation here is to feel like, well, so there's nothing I can do. None of this is in my control. But there is something that is in your control. And that's Chaitanya. Intention. What is your intention? What is your relationship going to be to these things? Okay? So there's a story I like. And it's the story of a psychiatrist. And this psychiatrist was quite well known in the 1940s, 50s, 60s. I think he died in the 1970s or early 80s. And this gentleman by the name of Victor Frankl. And during the Second World War, he was incarcerated in Auschwitz and Belsen concentration camps. And he said that he just observed what was happening then. And he said he saw a large number of people just go into despair. Nothing was under their control. All control had been taken away from them. And so there was nothing they could do. They were just subject to fate. And it was a very painful place. Every morning there'd be a knock on the door. Well, probably not a knock, just the door kicked open. And a number of numbers would be called out, but they all had a number. And those people would leave and never be seen again. So they became under control of their life and death. And he said, but I noticed there was a small group of people who were doing something different. And because they were doing something different, they didn't have the same sense of despair. And he said it took him a while to understand what was going on here. I mean, he didn't put himself in that category, but he was just observing. And then he said, then I just understood what was going on. And he said, I understood that you can take away all of the human freedoms. And so like Auschwitz is definitely trying to do that. You can take away all of the human freedoms, bar the freedom to choose your relationship to whatever is happening. He said you have the freedom to choose your own way. He said that cannot be taken away from you, but you can give it away. So here is Chaitanya. You've got this big bucket of sankharas. It's got every mental activity and state in it that's not feeling and perception. It's huge. In the Abhidharma, they try to name all of the possibilities in there. It's a very long list. But of everything that's in there, Chaitanya, choice, we might interpret it or translate it as intention or volition, is the most important, I would say, of everything that's in the sankharas. The sankhara canon. Yeah. And positive or victim identified. So instead of thinking that none of this is self, none of this is my control, the situation is hopeless. The situation, I just have to go with whatever happens. No. The Buddha identified that we have choice. And that's what we've been exercising in the last 6 days or so. Seeing that we have a choice. How do we express that choice? That's 6 hours. What choice are we exercising in the 6 hours? What is the choice we are exercising? How is the non-intelligent expressed in the way we describe? We will describe the impermanence, not taking it personally. Seeing and taking something personally and choosing to release away from that. Because when we take it personally, we have created this identity.
And one other thing is where your attention is, because not to keep your attention on things you don't want, to keep your attention on things you want. So certain times there is upset or there is anxiety or fear is there, but we are not saying to kind of suppress the fear or make the fear go away. It may be still there, but you can choose to have your attention on your spiritual friend or the feeling which is there of metta or equanimity. And then what happens is you are not feeding this which has come up, and you are feeding what you want to feed. That is your attention.
So this process in 6 hours. Seeing that you attach to the feeling and choosing to come back to what the Brahmana is. The Brahmana is a very healing place. Okay. So that is how identity does not come to be. Lady, what is the noble aim for? Friend in the Sangha, it is just this noble aim for that is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Lady, is the noble aim for conditioned or unconditioned? So is it created by setting up appropriate conditions, or does it exist without that? Friend Vipassana, the noble eightfold path is conditioned. Everything is conditioned, apart from one thing. What is that? No. The only unconditioned state is nirvana, because we have given up all conditioning about body. So even the rarefied states you might experience, they're still conditioned. So the path we want is not to hold on to those. Friend Sangha, the noble eightfold path is conditioned. Lady, are the three aggregates, now the aggregates, the word aggregate just means group. Okay, so this is not the individual canvas of body, feeling, perception, sankharas, and consciousness here. They are the three groups included by the Noble Eightfold Path, or is the Noble Eightfold Path included by the three groups? So just listen what the three groups are here. The three groups are not included in the Eightfold Path for Vipassana, but the Noble Eightfold Path is included by the three groups. Right? So, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, this is in the group of virtue. Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These states are included in the group of concentration or collectedness. Right view and right intention. These states are included in the group of wisdom. So we can break down the Eightfold Path into virtue, collectedness, and wisdom. Okay? So as we're practicing with the Eightfold Path, all of these things are being developed. And the Eightfold Path exists each time we do the 6 R's. Okay? Each aspect of this, the Eightfold Path, is present in the 6 R's. So each time we do the 6 R's, we're reconfirming the Eightfold Path. Also, when you do the 6 R's, practice enlightenment and actually containing them as well. So the 6 R's are a wonderful practice.
Is the mindedly the only agent in the path?
Well, the first thing to do is recognize the stubbornness. Because the stubbornness is either attachment or aversion. Okay? It's either holding on or pushing away. So sometimes our stubbornness is to try to suppress something. Yes? Not letting ourselves recognize what's actually there. You know? So we might be with the experience of some aspect of the jhana which we like. So then we're stubbornly holding on to that, not 6Ring it, okay, because we like it. Yeah. Or we might be caught in a chain of thought, and there's something satisfying about that chain of thought. So we don't want to 6R. Okay? Maybe we get on the chain of thought, we kind of get into a self-righteous frame of mind. And that self-righteousness can feel very good. And we're reluctant to 6R. Because it kind of feels like it's justifying where we are, and that's really quite comfortable. So when you see the stubbornness, you're no longer being stubborn. Yeah. When you're being stubborn, it's not visible. So as soon as you see stubbornness, you're now being mindful. So then just smile at yourself. Just smile at how sticky the mind is. Be kind. Don't beat yourself up.
Bhante used to say that if you cannot smile, then laugh. So laugh at your mind, saying that how stubborn it is. And just have that kind of feeling of just laughing at yourself.
Bhante Vipassana sometimes would encourage us to laugh when we saw the mind was stuck. And he said, it doesn't matter how the mind comes out, it can be quite artificial. You know, just go, ha 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 ha. But every time you notice the mind stuck, do that in this sitting. So we'd all be sitting in the room. You know, we'd be sitting there. And then you'd hear, ha ha ha. And then you'd see someone else go, ha ha ha. And then it would start. And everyone would start, ha ha ha. And then everyone would just be. And then everyone would actually be genuinely laughing. And then everyone would realize their minds had just settled out. So it's a wonderful practice. You know, artificial laughing is just silly.
Use genuine laugh.
And when you let yourself laugh, how does it feel? Yeah? Yeah? Can you feel the whole body is just let go of tension?
What specific to the meditation practice, what's the difference between attention and awareness? Because there are these
Attention is the act of direction, okay, of where you place your attention. Okay, having placed your attention, what have you become aware of? Okay?
if the laughter is happening through pop of natural jokes came across the jokes in the mind, can it also be a history for practice?
Okay. That laughter is the laughter of attachment. Okay? When that comes up in the mind, it sticks up. What Bhante Viramansi was asking you to do is not laugh at something amusing in the mind, but laugh at the stickiness of the mind. So when you hear people starting to laugh, you realize that their mind is not really any different to yours. And that's really helpful. Because you can look at certain people and think, they've spent a long time. That person's not moved. They ain't going to sit as long as I do. And we end up with a league people. Where are they moving? Okay? But when you start hearing people laugh at the stickiness of the mind, and being able just comes out. Lady, what is connectedness? What is the basis of connectedness? What is the equivalent of connectedness? What is the development of connectedness? Unification of mind from the Sangha is connectedness. So unification of mind here means drawing the mental faculties towards a single purpose. Okay, unifying the mind. It's not one-pointedness. Okay, it's drawing the focus to it's unifying the purpose of the mind. The four foundations of mindfulness are the basis of connectedness. And the four foundations of mindfulness is awareness of the body. Okay? So, in the Sakiti Yoga, we're fundamentally showing you how to bring an awareness to the body in a way that doesn't build attachment to the body. Okay? So when we work with the energetic, we're not caught up in the way the body is, or how it feels, or how the shape it forms. That's form. Okay? So this is about taking us away from clinging to form. Okay? The form is still there, but we're not holding on to it. It appears out of the process of yoga. Okay? The four right kinds of striving. So striving here is not pushing, it's how do we harness our effort. So what are the four right kinds of striving or effort? Any idea?
Right effort or harmonious practice.
You know, could you? It's recognizing that something unwholesome has caught mind. It's releasing away from the wholesome. It's allowing the wholesome. It's allowing the wholesome to arise and keeping with that wholesome state of mind. What is that process? The
Six
six
hours.
arts. So the four right forms of striving are in the six arts. The repetition, development, and cultivation of these same states. That's the foundations of mindfulness, which is awareness of the body, awareness of feeling, awareness of what's going on in the mind, and awareness of the phenomenon in the mind. Okay? So those are the four foundations of mindfulness. The unification of mind and the four kinds of striving. Okay? That's the equivalent. Okay? The repetition, development, and cultivation of those same states are the development of connectedness therein. What's the repetition that you do? the 6 arms. When you do that, you start to develop your awareness. Okay? And when you start to develop your awareness, you start to cultivate wisdom.
And for me, cultivation gives this image of a field, you know. In the field you plow, you put the seeds, but then you also kind of care for it. There is a kind of a Indian doha which is there that धीरे धीरे रे मना धीरे सब कुछ होए माली सींचे सौ बड़ा ऋतु आए फल होए. So when the season is right, only then you will receive the fruits of it. So you may put 100 buckets of water, but that would not work. But you have to wait for the right conditions for it to. So you have to kind of cultivate this practice. You have to cultivate it on as much as possible. It takes time. Some people kind of have the seeds which are very well fertilized. You know, they may have Monsanto GMO seeds which will kind of grow faster. And somewhere you may have kind of a organic seeds which will take more time. So, but you have to cultivate this. You have to give time and allow it to grow. So that is what the cultivation is about. Development is about.
And you've also got to recognize that you might have planted a dozen seeds in a dozen pots, and they don't all come up at the same time, even though you've treated them the same way. So you can think of that as different seedings. Okay? There's nothing in your practice which determines that your next seed will be the same as your last. Okay? Because the conditions have changed. You're not the same person. And so the idea of the beginner's mind is very helpful when you sit down. Just sit down with the purpose of simply seeing what's going on this time. What will be the same is the wisdom, seeing impermanence, seeing dukkha, seeing the impersonality, seeing how things arise without your control. That the only control you have is your relationship to it. And that determines whether it proliferates or drops away. That there's a cause for dukkha, and there's a cessation of dukkha. These are constants in every practice. So, we tend to think that practice needs to be a certain way. Alright? But you've got to think of it in this way. At least this is how I think about it, and I find it very helpful. You've got a relatively cheap camera. You go out, you take a photograph of the room. Okay? You look at it on the screen. Oh yeah, you can see it's the moon. But, now with the same camera, you can take 1,000 photographs of the moon, same night. And if you add them all together, you'll get a great photograph of the moon. Why? Because the real signal adds up, and all the noise cancels each other out. It's called a signal to noise ratio. Yes. If you use the same camera to take 1,000 photographs, and you digitally add those photographs together, what comes through is the true signal, which is the structure of the moon. What gets cancelled is all the blurs. Okay? Because the blurs are random. So as you sit more and more, you begin to see what is common to all your sittings, which is the signal, which is the Dharma, and not the noise, which is one pleasant, this is unpleasant, did I feel this way, this one, did I not feel this way, the other one, yeah. And the signal that comes through is wisdom. You see anicca, dukkha, anatta. You see the origination. You see the arising of dukkha. You see how it persists. You see how it ceases. Okay? This is what's common between the practices. Not the incidental effects. Okay? Judge your practice by what you come to learn and understand, not the way you felt about it. Okay? Alright. Lady, how many formations are there? So remember the formations. And everything in mentality. Yeah? Okay. There are these three formations, friends. Okay? Bodily formation, verbal formation, and mental formation. Okay. But lady, what is bodily formation? What is verbal formation? What is mental formation? Breathing in and out breathing, friend Saka, are bodily formation. Applying thought and sustained thought, or thinking and examining thought, are verbal formation. Perception and feeling are mental formation. So this is covering all of the experience that you can have. Okay? Why is it breathing and out breathing? Because it's body. It's showing you that this is related to the physical body. Okay? Verbal formation is all of the stuff that goes on in your mind. All of the stuff that you generate. This is, if you like, right speech. Okay? And then the outside the formations, you have this feeling and perception, which are a separate category. Okay? And they are the mental formation. Okay? So, thought, speech, and action. Okay? These formations together. But lady, why are in breathing and out breathing the body formation? Why are they applying thought or thinking and examining thought the verbal formation? Why are perception and feeling the mental formation? Friend Masaka, in breathing and out breathing are bodily formation. Are bodily, these states are bound up with the body. So anything that's related to the body is included in this category, including the tension you feel and that you choose to release. First one applies thought and sustains thought into thinking and examining thought, and subsequently one breaks out into speech. That is why thinking and examining thought are the verbal formation, and that speech can be internal within ourselves. Perception and feeling are not mental. These are states bound up with the mind, and that is why perception and feeling are mental formation. Remember, everything that goes on in your mind, you need perception to see it. Okay? So what the mind sees is mental formation. Lady, how does the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling come to be? Okay? So up to this point, have you recognized in your own practice what's being described here? All the different things that have been described. The identification going on. Yeah. The way that the six arms releases away from things that confuse us back into complexity, back into simplicity. Okay. Are these things that you recognize in your own practice? Yes? No? Yeah? You're happy with that? So here we have your personal verification of what's being described. Now we're moving into another realm of experience, which you may or may not have experienced. Lady, how does the attainment of the cessation of perception come to be? Friend Vasaka, when a student is attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, it does not occur to them, I shall attain this cessation of perception and feeling. Or I am attaining the cessation of perception and feeling. Or I have attained the cessation of perception and feeling. But rather, their mind has previously been developed in such a way that it leads them to that state. So, how are you developing your mind in such a way that it leads to that state? What are you doing? Sixari. Because Sixari is the process of relinquishment. You're relinquishing your identity with what's going on. You're relinquishing away from the unwholesome. This is the preparation of your mind. But you have no feeling for what you're preparing for. There's no anticipation in the mind. Now I'm going to experience this. I'm just on the edge of it. Doesn't occur. The cessation of perception and feeling has no warning to it. Okay. And when you're in the cessation of perception and feeling, you don't know you're doing. And when you come out of the cessation of perception and feeling, you have no awareness of making that decision. Okay? But once you come out, you recognize that something has occurred. Lady, when a student is attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, which state sees first? The bodily formation, the verbal formation, or the mental formation? Friend Visakha, when a student is attaining the cessation of perception and feeling, first the verbal formation ceases. And when does the verbal formation cease in your practice? When does the chattering mind disappear as a constant element of your practice? Not distracting thoughts coming in, but as a constant background occurrence.
When you recognize the term.
When you recognize better, but when you do recognize it better, and you release away from it, you really push away from it. What is that process described in the circumstance? Say again?
The eighth time.
No, the eighth one.
Second, very good.
Yeah. When we move from the first jhana to the second jhana, what we give up is that thinking and examining thought, that constant dialogue of the mind. Okay? It's not the absence of verbalization, because investigation is often in verbalization in the mind. When we get distracted by hindrances, verbalization will be there, and we release and relax and come back. Remember, when the hindrances are there, we're not in the jhana. When we release, relax, and smile and come back, we're back in. When we're in the other jhanas, there tends not to be any chatter in the mind, that distracting thought. There can be an awareness which is going, I recognize what's going on here. Okay, but that's investigation. So, cessation of first the form of verbal formation ceases, then the bodily formation. Have you experienced in your practice times when you're not aware of your body? Okay, some of you will have seen that. Okay, this is the bodily formation being relinquished. It's not something you can choose, it's something that just comes about. And then the mental formation. Well, the mental formation is perception and feeling. And that comes with the state of the cessation of perception and feeling.
We can also say cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness because they are all together. So over that space, there is no consciousness. That's the reason there is no mental activity.
So, lady, how does emergence from attained cessation of perception and feeling come to be? From the cycle. When a student is emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, it does not occur to them, I shall emerge from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, or I am emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, or I have emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, but rather their mind has previously been developed in such a way that it leads them to that state. Okay? So, this is not under your control. Now, as your practice develops, and should you get to the state of anagami or arahant, then it is possible to make a determination about how long you'll stay in that state of cessation of perception and feeling of consciousness. But if you're not, that's not available. And said in the commentaries that you can remain in that state of cessation for up to 7 days. After 7 days, there's a physical deterioration of the body. But within 7 days, the body does not deteriorate. Without food, yeah. Okay. Or, yeah. Or, then we'll come on to what that state is like in a moment. Where does the energy come from? Yeah. When a student is emerging from the attainment of cessation, perception, and feeling, which states arise first in them? The bodily formation, the verbal formation, or the mental formation? Friend, the second. When a student is emerging from the attainment of the cessation, perception, and feeling in consciousness, first the mental formation arises, then the bodily formation, and then the verbal formation. Just the reverse order of going in. When a student is emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, how many kinds of contact, touching? Now, what's being described here, remember, as I went through the stages of understanding, contact was always present until hostage.
Which stage of Arupanana?
Each stage of understanding, each stage of jhana, until we got to neither perception.
Eighth jhana, actually.
The eighth jhana.
Neither perception nor non-perception.
Okay? In that state, there is no contact. Okay? Friend disciple, when a student is emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness, 3 kinds of contact touch them. Voidless contact, so this is void of the sense of self. Signless contact, there is no object. Okay? So the signless is present, and desireless contact. Okay? So this is preparing the mind for the experience of Nirvana. Nirvana is the signless state. Lady, when a student has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling, to what does their mind incline? To what does it lead? To what does it tend? Friend Masaka, when the student has emerged from the attainment of the cessation of perception and feeling and consciousness, their mind inclines towards seclusion, leads to seclusion, tends to seclusion. So, this is the mind completely withdrawing from the side and leaning towards the silence, which is the direct experience of Nirvana. Remember, Dharmadina was an arahant. So she's describing something that would have been her direct experience. How many kinds of feeling are there? Friend Masaka. There are 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neither painful nor pleasant feeling. But later, what is What is painful feeling? What is neither painful nor pleasant feeling? And decide. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as pleasant and soothing is pleasant feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally as painful and hurting is painful feeling. Whatever is felt bodily or mentally is neither soothing nor hurting, is neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Then, what is pleasant and what is painful in regard to pleasant feeling? So the question here is pleasant feeling. Does it have a pleasant component, but also does it have a painful component? What is painful and what is pleasant in regard to painful feeling? Same question about painful feeling. What is pleasant and what is painful in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend and son, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it persists, and painful when it changes. Painful feeling is painful when it persists, and pleasant when it changes. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling is pleasant when
Ooh.
my apologies.
Unpleasant feeling.
Yes,
It is pleasant when it ceases.
yes, indeed. So here we go. So whatever is felt bodily or mentally is painful and hurting is painful feeling. What is pleasant and what is painful in regard to pleasant feeling? What is painful and what is pleasant in regard to painful feeling? What is pleasant and what is painful in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend disciple, pleasant feeling is pleasant when it persists and painful when it changes. Painful feeling is painful when it persists and pleasant when it changes. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling is pleasant when there is knowledge of it, and painful when there is no knowledge. So what is the knowledge of neither painful nor pleasant feeling? What is the knowing of that? Secondly,
It is impersonal, but what is the feeling? What is the feeling?
what is the feeling of neither pleasant nor painful?
Hmm?
Okay, give me another name when you try to this practice.
Huh? Equanimity, correct. Equanimity. Yes.
So if you're aware of equanimity, then you're aware of neither painful nor pleasant. And painful when there is no knowledge of it. So what is the experience of no knowledge of neither painful nor pleasant? It is a form of ignorance. And what's the day-to-day experience of that? Not pain.
Unawareness, awareness. That is good.
Unawareness, indifference.
Indifference.
Um, we kind of have no knowledge that something is neither, in our day-to-day lives, it's the painful things which are real events like this, the pleasant feelings that are kind of like this, and then the equanimity kind of gets ignored. We don't recognize when we're in a state of equanimity. It's kind of like nothing's happening. So how many times have you come to an interview and gone, just blank, nothing's happening, can't see anything, lost the object of my practice, meditation's not working, don't understand what's happening. Okay? That's because you haven't got something like this or something like this to look at. But when you actually apply your mind, you see this.
One of the things I give an example is when we are traveling in a bus or something like that, and we see that there are 4 or 5 stops have gone, and we don't know. Or when we are in train, we just notice, oh, some stops have gone, and we don't recognize what has happened in the gap which is there. Or when you are in the Sunday or Saturday morning, you are sitting after a cup of tea, you are waiting for somebody, and then we realize, oh, 1 hour has passed, and that person comes, and then we kind of again restart, reboot, and go somewhere or have a conversation. So something like that. There are gaps in our life. Those gaps are mostly about indifference or not recognizing those things.
Now, this is different to when you see it and you realize you sat for a certain period and it's not like just this long. That's not indifference because you've been with the experience. Okay? Indifference is kind of like, oh, goodness, is that the time?
So would boredom qualify as unawareness or would it be a playful feeling?
Well, it depends. Do you enjoy boredom? Okay? You see, modern life is kind of being engineered that we never feel bored. We can always grow, we can always do something. Okay? But actually, boredom is a very creative place. So I used to take my children away into the mountains, and we used to camp in remote areas. And we never took any toys. It only takes half an hour for young children to just start creating out of what's there. Yeah. Initially, it's bored, I don't have this, I don't have that. But, I wish I bought this, I wish I bought that. But then they recognize that, okay, that's the reality. Now we can start doing something else. So boredom can be a real source of creativity. Um, so then is it an unpleasant state or a pleasant state? Kind of depends on the context. So be careful about labeling certain experiences in one category or another. Because when we get really bored, but we have the discipline to stay still, the mind eventually starts looking what's going on.
So, I was wondering, uh, so actually, we told about absorption and jhana. So, why is there so much of importance of jhana in the sutra which we spoke of?
Okay,
Because
so
this
let me,
jhana is also about to pass away, and it may also give some kind of pain when it passes away. And yeah, and
let me just paraphrase it. Why are jhanas so important in the sutras? Well, remember, the Buddha is describing how the mind works, and each of you have described your experience of jhanas. So, if there's this structure, the Buddha is simply describing this. But he's not saying wisdom is in the jhana. Okay? What he's saying is the mind naturally moves through this process. As it does, right, certain things are understood, like relinquishing thinking and examining thought, and then relinquishing uplifting joy. We might think uplifting joy is a wonderful place to be. It's the antidote for all the things I don't like. Okay? But it's a temporary respite Because when you come out of the jhana, all the things you don't like are still there. The Buddha says this is not release. He went through the jhanas with his first teachers, and he said there's still more. Sariputta went through the jhanas and said, and I still understood that there is more, because each of these states is still conditioned. They're subject to the conditions being right for them to be there. When those conditions change, they disappear. So they're unreliable in terms of release. Okay? But they're a natural aspect of having a human mind. And the Buddha is describing what that is like.
But Buddha is not prescribing it. Like he is not saying that you should have all these things. In one of the suttas where Ananda is speaking to somebody, he is saying that in the first jhana also you can attain nibbana, second, third, fourth, and the arupa jhanas also in the metta, karuna, mudita, upekha, the brahma viharas also you can attain the awakening. So, what as Hugh has just mentioned that it is naturally if you are going into those states, then Buddha is describing those states which have happened naturally in the process. But it is not that that is actually required. What is required is our understanding of that process, how this is impermanent. How are we creating dukkha? Why are we kind of resisting what is there? If there is fear in our mind, the fear is not the problem. Our resistance to this fear is problem. The anxiety is not the problem. Our resistance to the anxiety is problem. Then we see personal or impersonal. How we are taking something which is impersonal into personal and creating problems for ourselves. All our sitting which we are breaking, we are taking the thought, it is enough. I have had enough. Now I should get up. Now, when you take this thought as personal, now I should get up. That is the reason you are getting up. And I should not sit now. Then that is the reason you are not sitting also. So all of those are because of the thoughts we are taking personally. So what that is you have to understand. And rest of the things are as they happen naturally. Then let it happen.
So if we correctly understand jhana is basically concentration, right? The concentration.
You know, the absorption dominance is due to absorption. The aware dominance is due to effectiveness. There are different ways of working with these. The absorption dominance, and some people here who may have experiences, usually they will take a factor of the jhana. So for instance, the second jhana, the feeling of uplifting joy. And they will then take that feeling as the object of their attention. So then you absorb into the actual factor of the jhana itself. Okay? And develop that. Okay? Now within those structures, that has some value, and there's a whole sort of way of working with that. But in this, we don't use the jhanas in that way. We're using the jhanas just as signposts. Okay? If you hold on to the signposts, how is your journey going to continue? Okay? So we use this as a way of seeing how the mind is developing, not holding on to them. Okay? But as Bhante says, if you manage to look at the three marks, ignorance, dukkha, impersonality, or you manage to see dependent origination very clearly, or your understanding of the source of dukkha, its cessation, and the path. And that awareness is available in any of the jhanas. Okay? Remember, the jhanas are a state of mind without hindrances. It's the absence of hindrances which give us the opportunity to create wisdom, to see wisdom. If we see wisdom sufficiently, then that understanding doesn't require us to go through the subsequent jhanas, wherever we are. But often, we need to let it push more. We need to let go more. We So the jhana structures described because as we relinquish more and more, these states appear in the mind. And that's what the Buddha is describing. Okay?
And this is also the clear objective that we use earlier. If through absorption of mana, this
We're not doing absorption of
mana that gets sukha, and the sukha which gets released, and then that is like letting go is also like the sukha which is gained and then letting go is also
the letting go does not create sukha. Sukha is pleasant feeling. Dukkha is unpleasant feeling. Neither pleasant nor unpleasant is asukha and dukkha. Okay? As you develop going through this, you get to the place of equanimity. Equanimity is the place of neither pleasant nor unpleasant.
No, what I think what he is trying to say is that there is sukha and the relinquishment of that joy which is coming up in the meditation is also a part of the meditation. But that would automatically happen as he was explaining that as you progress, you go into equanimity. Then that is the process of jhanas. No, the first jhana there are five factors. Then there is joy is still there. There is happiness with the body is there. Then you give up the joy, you come into the third jhana, there is happiness with the body, then you give up that and you come into equanimity. So that is a natural process. So you don't have to kind of consciously do it. If you keep up with the practice, it will happen.
When you leave it's relinquishment is natural, normal. So there is nothing to
There comes a stage in practice which if you choose to develop it, then you can choose, the process of saying in your practice, may I go no higher than the third jhana instead. And that would be enough when you want to explore the nature of what that jhana is. Okay? If you're so inclined. You can't determine which jhana you're in, but you can determine not to go any higher and explore that. Okay? But that's to see the nature of the jhana, not to get absorbed into it. Okay? It's a natural process. And that's what the beauty of this is. This is what the Buddha discovered. That this natural process not only takes you through, but also has release at the end of it. Okay.
Underlying tendencies.
What underlying tendency underlies pleasant feeling? What underlying tendency underlies pain? What underlying tendency underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Masaka, the underlying tendency to lust. And lust is sensory desire. Okay? We tend in the English language to feel that lust is about sexual energy and that inter-exchange, but lust here means any sensory desire that we want. The underlying tendency to lust underlie all pleasant feeling. Does the underlying tendency to aversion underlie all painful feeling? Sorry, I need to read that again. Does the underlying tendency to lust underlie all no, I missed that. I'm going to start.
One paragraph.
Let me start again. Lady, what underlying tendency underlies pleasant feeling? What underlying tendency underlies painful feeling? What underlying tendency underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Messiah, the underlying tendency to lust underlies painful, pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion underlies painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance underlies neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Lady, does the underlying tendency to lust underline all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion underline all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance underline all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Masaka, the underlying tendency to lust does not underline all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to lust does not underlie all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie all painful feeling. Again, the underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. We've already covered neither pleasant nor painful. You know, if you're aware of equanimity, there's no ignorance. If you're indifferent, there's ignorance. Okay? Namely, what should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling? What should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend, the underlying tendency to lust should be abandoned in regard to pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion should be abandoned in regard to painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance should be abandoned in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Namely, does the underlying tendency to lust have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling? Does the underlying tendency to aversion have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling? Does the underlying tendency to ignorance have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Friend Pasaka, the underlying tendency to lust does not have to be abandoned in regard to all pleasant feeling. The underlying tendency to aversion does not have to be abandoned in regard to all painful feeling. The underlying tendency to ignorance does not have to be abandoned in regard to all neither painful nor pleasant feeling. Here, Francis, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from all causes sin, a student enters a qualified in the first jhana, which is accompanied with applying or initials and
Thinking and examining.
thinking and examining thought, with joy and happiness, all in seclusion. With that, the student abandons lust, and the underlying tendency of lust does not underlie that. So here's the pleasure of the first jhana, and what Dharmina is saying is that the underlying tendency of lust does not underline that pleasure, because it's a jhana quality. Herein, the student considers thus, when shall I enter upon and abide in that place that no one's now enter upon and abide in? In one who thus generates a longing for the supreme liberations, grief arises with that longing as condition. So we wish to progress, okay? But we have a sense of grief that we haven't yet. That grief is not unwholesome. Okay, it's an unpleasant feeling, but it's not unwholesome because it's born of the desire for release. Okay, so here's an unpleasant feeling which doesn't have to be given up. So with that, so in one who thus generates a longing for supreme liberation, grief arises in that longing as condition. With that, the student abandons aversion, and the underlying tendency to aversion does not underlie that, even though they feel the grief, because they're still in the jhana, okay, and they have this wholesome wish. Okay. Here, with the abandoning of aversion, and with the previous disappearance of joy and grief, a student enters one who abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither painful nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. With that, the student abandons ignorance, and the underlying tendency to ignorance does not underlie that feeling of neither pleasure nor pain. Okay? So the equanimity of the jhanas doesn't have ignorance in it, because we know equanimity is there. When you go through your practice and you report, everything's, it's just like, I couldn't see anything. There wasn't anything to meditate on. Okay, you're out of the jhana at that moment because you're not seeing the equanimity. And sometimes in the Kwasapati, myself, the general asks you, well, what was actually there? And then when you begin to realize that something was there, then your awareness of the equanimity comes back. So we're just going to read the last part of the sutta. Now, the last part of the sutta can sound confusing until we realize that the word counterpart, the word is translated as counterpart, has two possible meanings depending on its contents. It can mean something resembles something, or something is the opposite of something. Okay, so, lady, what is the counterpart of pleasant feeling? Friend, the cycle, painful feeling is the counterpart of pleasant feeling. So that's the case of the opposite. What is the counterpart of painful feeling? Pleasant feeling is the counterpart of painful. What is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling? Ignorance is the counterpart of neither painful nor pleasant feeling. So we either know this, neither painful nor pleasant, or we're ignorant of it. They're opposites. What is the counterpart of ignorance? True knowledge is the counterpart of ignorance. Okay. What is the counterpart of true knowledge? Deliverance is the counterpart of true knowledge. So here, the context is, what is the similarity? Okay, what is the resemblance of true knowledge? Deliverance is the counterpart of true knowledge. What is the counterpart of deliverance? Nibbana is the counterpart of deliverance. Okay, so if we experience deliverance, it's expressed in the experience of Nibbana. Then, what is the counterpart of Brahman? Friend Visakha, you have pushed this line of questioning too far. You are not able to grasp the limit to questions. For the holy life, friend Visakha, is grounded on Nibbana, culminates in banana, in Nibbana, ends in Nibbana. If you wish, friend Visakha, go to the Blessed One and ask him about the meaning of this, as the Blessed One explains it to you, so you should remember it. Then the lay follower Visakha, having delighted and rejoiced in the Kuni Dhammadina's words, rose from his seat after paying homage to her, keeping her on his right side. He went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, he sat down on one side and told the Blessed One his entire conversation with the Kuni Dhammadina. When he finished speaking, the Blessed One told him, the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina is wise. Visakha, the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina has great wisdom. If you had asked me the meaning of this, I would have explained it to you in the same way that the Bhikkhuni Dhammadina has explained it. Such is its meaning, and so you should remember it. That is what the Blessed One said. The lay follower Visakha was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So I hope, as we went through, you recognize something which you verified in your own practice. This is really important. Buddha said, do not take anything on faith. Do not take anything because I tell you. Do not take anything because other people say you should. Investigate. See what is true for you. Verify it. So this is a very scientific approach. It's a set up the experiment. Observe what is happening in the experiment. Be objective about what you see. Note, investigate what it is that you observe. Compare it to what's being described. Does it fit? Does it not? Does it bring greater understanding or not? Does it bring the relief of dukkha or not? Does it bring behavior change? Your relationship to experience? Or not? Self-verifying. At the time of the Buddha, there were many different teachings, many different things going on. There's another where some kind of frustrated because seeing all the other sort of teachings going on and how people are listening to this and listening to that. And they go, no. I said, well, don't you think if you just meditated, people will understand that you've got true teaching? And he said, well, meditation is known as this and this teaching, and this teaching, and this teaching. There's nothing about that demonstration, that experience, which is going to make people think that this is the right thing, because that effect is available in different teachings. Don't get caught up in experiences, but verify. Does this produce ignorance and build? Does it bring an understanding of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, the distress, suffering we feel, and impersonality? Do we see the causality in your experience? Do you see that you have a choice in that process of causality? The choice is to see the whole world. Do you come to understand how we individually cause our suffering? How we individually can bypass the cessation of that suffering? And the suffering is not what happens to us, but our aversion to what happens to us. It's in the relating to our experience. And we have a choice about how we relate. If your practice shows you that, you're building wisdom. If we're simply letting experiencing, as Santi Ramsey would say, you've just gone to the candy shop. That doesn't mean that experiences appearing are wrong, but it's your relationship with them. Don't make them the practice, but just signposts on the way.